Hello and welcome back to the Up and Coming Artist Podcast. I'm Christian, a photographer.
And I'm Ben, an animator.
So, we're making another one of these little intro before the intro, because coming up real soon is Ground Zero.
Yes, the groundbreaking pop-up is this Saturday. That is February 23rd. Once again, we're not getting any kickback from this. We just know some amazing artists who are going to be there, and a great way to support the arts here in Southern California.
The event is free, and it is such a great way to connect with the art community and to support people that you want to see make movies, make television shows, or even just to buy a piece of art that looks freaking good on your wall.
Yeah, exactly. So you can find all of that at GZAExpo.com or that same handle, GZAExpo, on Instagram for that. And on Instagram, you can also find my show, which premiered this last weekend on Toon Therapy's channel. So it's TOON Therapy, and it's called Gear and Gadget.
Yeah, guys, we encourage you to check it out. Ben basically created this show from scratch, and it looks amazing. It's a super good time. Please go support it. I got nothing else to say.
Well, as my segue out of that, one thing that Gear and Gadget really taught me a lot about was editing. And so I'm so glad that that's what we're able to talk to our guest who's on today, Christian, and that is Ben Slabach.
Enjoy the episode.
Now, Christian, I think for this podcast, you're going to have to call me Benny D.
Why? Why would I have to do that, Benny D?
Well, thanks, first of all, for starting with that. But also because the guest that we have on today may or may not have the same name as me.
I'm Ben.
Yeah. And this is Ben Slabach.
Hi.
Welcome to the
Hi,
podcast.
he's waving. Yeah, welcome to the podcast, man.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. Now, my very short bio of you is film editor and awesome dude. But I'm sure that you've got more. So what else have you done and what do you like to do?
So I say I am a video editor, videographer, and colorist, predominantly in that order. I also like to throw in filmmaker, storyteller, but it's just nice words for basically the same thing, which is I make videos and do stuff like that.
Yeah. That's awesome. And for those reasons, part of me wishes that this was a video podcast just so that people could see your amazing work. But since they can't, how would you describe the work of a film editor, a video editor?
Well, it's a lot easier being a video editor when I'm shooting my own work, which is most of the time. But occasionally, I'm not shooting my own work. So a lot of it is basically, at least in terms of being a video editor, is taking all of the material and finding the best 5%. And because the rest of the 95% might not be very good material. And our job is to make the material look good, make the people look good, take out the ums and the pauses and use the 33rd take, not the first 32 takes. And basically, we're not supposed to be noticed. So if you watch a movie or a video, you don't want to go, wow, that video editor was really good. You want to be oh, that was a good movie or a good video or something, and completely not notice the video editing, which is hopefully what I can accomplish every time.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Yeah, I mean, and just right before we started recording the podcast, for those listening, we listened to Ben's editing reel, which is fantastic. You guys should all give it a listen, and we'll shout out more about that later. So, Ben, to get into it, so what inspired you to get into film and get into editing?
I'd love to have some great story of when I was 8 years old, I saw Star Wars, but it's really boring. Basically, I was looking at colleges, and there's a college I liked, and it was I could get into graphic design or web design or video editing. I think audio video production is the technical term. And I was yeah, I kind of like doing video stuff, so I wouldn't mind doing that. And my mom was well, it says the salary estimate is the lowest out of those three. Are you sure you want to do it? And I was yeah, why not? We'll give it a try. And it turned out to work very nicely. But if you back up to when I was a kid, my friends and I started like just recording ourselves, like pretending to be like news anchors, like on a audio cassette tape, and we thought that was the coolest thing. And then we got like I guess it wasn't a mini DV, it was like full extra large DV camcorder. I'm like, oh sweet, we can like video ourselves doing the news
from like the 80s. It's
yeah,
huge.
it was a big thing. And then that got into like movie making, and then we hit middle school or high school, and we're like, this is weird. We're not kids anymore. We're in middle school. We're gonna stop doing this. And so I didn't like do any videoing or any photography or anything. And then at some point, probably in high school, my grandpa gave me a camera and my dad gave me a camera. So I was just like exploring with that. And then we went to church camp, and I was like the guy who was taking pictures and made like a little video, and that led to like, just exploring the video and video editing world, which led to going to college for video editing.
That's awesome, man.
Was there something else that you thought you were gonna get into?
No, not. I mean, yes, but like when I was a kid, I was like, I want to be in the army because that's cool. And then when I was in like middle school or high school, I was like, I love baseball. I'm gonna be a baseball player. And then I was like, no, probably not. So it was just a lot of...
So you settled for art.
Yes, exactly. Just process of elimination, basically.
That's awesome. And this was in Ohio, right?
Yes, Cincinnati, Ohio. The filmmaking epicenter of the world.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask about that because... here in Southern California, where we're recording this right now, when I said as, I don't know, high school, like, oh, I want to go into animation, that was at least kind of in people's radar. But Ohio, is that, like, is film editing, do you get what I'm trying to say? Like, is that on people's radar? Is that kind of like, what are you talking about?
Like, in looking at, like, jobs in the Cincinnati area, like, when I was, like, graduating college... There are like a few like bigger production houses, but it's really only like 3 or 4. So if you have companies, in the greater Cincinnati area, they're going to like those 3 or 4. So if you're looking for jobs, it's like, well, we got one opening here and not a whole lot elsewhere. Whereas if you're looking for like jobs in Southern California, it's like, hey, here are 100 jobs. Take your pick. So definitely... getting into video and video editing in Cincinnati was not like oh, sweet, you'll get out of college and get a job right away. It was just like, graduate and, find your way, which is what I did.
Yeah.
Found your way to Southern California?
I did.
Yeah, and that's actually what I wanted to transition to. Was that kind of what professors at your school were telling you? Like, oh, you might want to think about California? Or was that just you on your own?
That was mostly just me. I did a college movie festival in college, and I really enjoyed that. It was like so hectic and stressful because I was like the leader on our like little group, and I loved it, but it was very, very stressful. So once it was done, I was like, man, I'm glad that's over. And after I graduated, I went back the next year, and I was watching the movies, and I was like, you know what? I kind of enjoyed that. Maybe I should like get into filmmaking or something, because I wasn't into like movies and like filmmaking. It was just like, hey, I have a camera and I shoot videos for my church or my friends or whatever. Mm-hmm. So I started listening to a bunch of movie podcasts, watching more movies, reading books, just immersing myself in like the movie world. And then at some point I was like, I kind of want to like get into filmmaking and be a director or a film editor or a cinematographer or something. So I figured, well, it's probably best to be in Southern California as opposed to Cincinnati. So I like saved my money, I applied for jobs, I got a job, and then I drove out here.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. And is that the job you still have at Moco?
It is, yes.
Okay.
I've been at my current job for almost 5 years now, which is either very cool or very sad.
Yeah. Hey, for people just looking for a job like me, like, that's pretty good.
Yes.
So in college, was it mostly editing work that you were doing, or was it more like they were teaching you the whole spectrum of video in general?
It was the whole spectrum. So like the degree is like audio video production, so it was like maybe like 40% audio, 60% video. I had 3 audio classes, which I loved and really enjoyed audio, but I'm not that good at. So it was primarily focused on like shooting video, editing video. There was also like some script writing in there, some graphic design. So basically the goal was like once you get out of college, you want to focus on either audio or video. But if you have a client who's like, hey, we have some Photoshop graphics, can you work on that? It's not like, hey, I'm a video editor, I don't deal with Photoshop. It's like, yeah, I know how to do that. If I need to like edit some audio real quick, I know how to do that. So very well rounded. But at that point I didn't know whether I wanted to get into like being a videographer or being a video editor or a little bit of both.
So what led you down the path to being primarily a video editor?
So the job I have now is 95% video editing. There is some shooting involved, but it's mostly editing. So usually that's what I'm doing like 40 hours a week. And when you do something 40 hours a week for like 5 years, you kind of get better at it than the thing that you don't do that often, which is like shooting video. Although I still love shooting video and photos as well.
Nice. So when you were in college, what kind of stuff were you shooting?
Project for school, which, let's see, I did like a music video with my brother, and that was like really fun because it was like the first thing that I did, and I was like, oh, I might actually be decent at this.
Yeah.
Even though I almost...
Doing stuff with your siblings.
Yeah. But I remember in my videography 1 class, I almost like failed the practical exam of like, turn on the camera, move the tripod, zoom in. I think I got like a C- and like barely passed. And then I did this project and I was like, oh, the teacher really loves it, so maybe I have a future here.
Yeah.
But it was like, we did a music video project. There was a stop motion project. Which
Woohoo!
We had to shoot like a little short form documentary. And it was really cool because we had, I believe, Canon XL2s, which were like tape cameras. Yeah. So I got in on the very last of that. But we had a bunch of ARRI lights, which we could like rent out. And it was so cool to be like, oh, I'm, a 19-year-old in college, but I've got like 3 lights and a camera bag and a tripod, and I can like shoot whatever I want.
Yeah.
So it was really cool to be exposed to like, some professional grade equipment, not like, hey, I'm gonna like go get some IKEA lights and shoot on my camera phone. Although if you wanted to do that, like to get practice, I guess that works.
Yeah. No one look around in this room at this podcast because that's pretty much what this is. And that's actually kind of my next question about school is because you kind of just mentioned about what camera you were using, the lights you were using, and was the technical side something that like really interested you, or was it kind of more just like the storytelling side of editing?
It was probably at first like the technical side, like, and it still is to a degree. Like I get very excited when I get to like play with a new camera or a new lens, or I'm shooting a wedding video, so I'm gonna try out this camera or whatever. But and that was definitely something that excited me in the beginning. But now it is like more of the story. So for example, I did a project just for fun with my family's like auto mechanic back in Cincinnati. I went back for Christmas and I was like, hey, I'm gonna rent a camera and just shoot that for fun. And I was using a camera that I was like excited to use, and I was very into like, ooh, let me play with the menu settings. But it was very much just like, I really enjoy this guy and I want to like tell his story, and I would have done it on a 8K professional red cinema camera or like my phone. Like I just wanted to like tell that story. So it is very much like being interested in the gear, but also like at the end of the day, it's like if there's a story there, you will enjoy it regardless of like what camera it's shot on.
I agree. So I would say that find myself more often on that side of the debate where I'm like, it doesn't matter what you shoot on, and so I could easily touch on that. But in your opinion, based on your experience, does the equipment kind of matter?
It does, kind of, because I know I've been working on a project for like a Kickstarter video, and one of the things that we were and are working on is like trying to make it look like it's, a professional video and not like, hey, I got my friend to shoot it on his phone.
Yeah.
And so it does matter, like, if you're shooting on an iPhone versus if you're shooting on, like, a Red cinema camera. But really, I think it does come down to the story. So if I see a, story about an auto mechanic who's a really cool guy, but it's, 720 small HD, like, I'm like, hey, it's not, I'm not going to go full screen with this video, but I'm engaged in this video. But if it's, a really, the lighting is really well, I'm watching this music video, it looks really cool, but, like, I'm not engaged in the music video. And it's like, well, it doesn't, like, matter what kind of equipment is if it's not, like, a entertaining story. Although, if you offered me an iPhone versus a Red cinema camera, I'm like, I'll probably go with the Red cinema camera.
No kidding. So then to just kind of bring it around to what we were talking about earlier, with that in mind, do you feel like because you've been doing video editing so long, when did that change happen for you, where you went from being kind of like all about the equipment to being more about the content?
It was probably when, because I listened to, like, a lot of podcasts, watched videos, read articles, and everyone who I was, listening to was like, oh, it's not about the camera. It's not. I'm like, but it is about the camera. Like, I love that video you did. Like, tell me what you shot. Yeah. And then, not all the time, but most of the time, I was like, oh, wait, I know that camera. I've shot on that camera, but how did he make it look like that? Yeah. Or how did she make it look that cool? And I'm going like, oh, it's so much more than, like, just the camera. It's all about, like, the lighting that you get, the, like, actors that you get, like, the content that you get, how you edit it, or, the story. So I started realizing when I would, like, do freelance projects, or if I'm shooting a wedding video, I would get, like, the cool gear, and I'm going, it looks good, but, like, there's something missing. Like, what is that? And it's like, oh, it's probably me. Like, I should just, like, get better at my craft. Which is, like, helpful because, like, oh, I can fix that, but also not very motivating because it's like, oh, it's me that's, like, the loose link in the chain.
Yeah. It's crazy. So did this epiphany come to you in college, or was it post-college?
It was definitely post-college. I was still way into gear, like, when I was in college, and still am. But, yeah, post-college when I'm going, like, oh, so it's not about the camera. And even if it is about the camera, sometimes my computer can't handle it, so I shouldn't get the camera that shoots 8K or whatever.
Yeah. Well, that just because we're on it, and we did talk about this a little bit before the podcast, but what do you like to shoot on? What do you have?
I have a Canon 60D, which is a fine camera. It shoots, like, 1080 HD. Not my main camera. Usually I rent a Sony a7S II or my work camera, which is a Panasonic GH4. And both shoot 4K and look really, really good and make my average work look above average.
Well, can I just jump in here? Yes. I know we're all talking about content is great, not the technical, but how do you feel about Sony's new sensors and everything? Do you feel like they're just completely crushing it?
Yes, I do love Sony a lot because I shoot on, well, I've predominantly shot, like, on Canon, and I don't have, like, a dog in the game, or whatever that expression is. So, like, if you say, like, hey, I'm Nikon, I'm like, oh, that's cool,
Yeah.
I shoot Canon, but,
Not a sponsor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
I hope not. I shoot Nikon.
But definitely the stuff that Sony's been putting out, I'm like, this is so much better in terms of, like, the video availabilities than, like, any other brand. Like, I think it'd be crazy not to at least, like, shoot on Sony a little bit, and I'm been, feverishly anticipating the release of the Sony a7S III, which I was like, oh, it's going to be released in late 2017. Oh, it's going to be released in early 2018. And now I'm like, well, it's 2019. It'll come out eventually.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, I'm just gonna shoot some cool stuff.
Yeah. Well, and this question might be too hard to be able to answer, but to someone like me who doesn't know anything about like cameras and stuff, how do you differentiate the ones that you're talking about?
So the basic thing that you're looking for is, of course, like the resolution. So if it's like HD or if it's 4K, and even if you are going to end up like outputting on HD, or even if it's like, you know, something for Instagram where you're looking at it on your phone, shooting on 4K helps a lot because there's so much more information that you're like compressing into a smaller file size. So it'd be like trying to paint a self-portrait on like an entire wall versus like on a sticky note. Like even if you're taking that wall and like taking it down to a sticky note, it still helps to like start on like a big canvas and then like work your way down. So that's like definitely the thing I'm looking for like in any camera is like, oh, I have a camera that shoots HD, but like I'm looking for 4K, so I'm looking for a 4K camera. Mm-hmm. And then definitely like what the frames per second is. So if I'm shooting a wedding and I might need to shoot something in slow motion, I'm looking for at least like 60 or 120 frames per second. After that, because most of the cameras I'm looking at have those qualities, so it's basically like of these cameras, whether it's Panasonic or Canon or Sony, like what distinguishes them is what I'm looking for is like color profiles. So the thing that I like in Sony cameras is that it can shoot really flat, which is a technical term for like there's not a whole lot of contrast. So the shadows aren't completely black and the highlights aren't like completely white. Because if you are, you know, taking a photo or shooting video with like your camera on your phone and you're shooting it like inside a room, the sunlight outside is going to be so white and the stuff inside is going to be so dark. But if you're shooting on a camera that has like a flat profile, it's not going to be as like white in, you know, the outside or as dark inside. So that gives you some room to like play with. And it looks a lot more professional. So that's mainly why I shoot on like Sony's when I can. The other thing is like technical stuff that I don't even really know, like bit depth, like 10-bit or 8-bit or 12-bit. All I know is like the higher is better, even though I don't know like what's the difference. Yeah, higher is better.
Just always buy the bigger number.
Yes, exactly. But it helps with like when you're color grading, because if it's, and you can probably Google search this and get a better answer than what I'm giving.
No, I want to hear it from you. Yeah.
So basically, the more color bit depth info you have, the better you can color grade. So if you try to take a sky shot and add like a gradient to it so it sort of looks cinematic, you might start to see like color banding. So it goes from like blue to darker blue to darker blue to darker blue, and it's like, well, I can see that because it looks like it's a color and then a new color as opposed to like a very smooth gradient. Yeah. So that's what I'm looking for in the technical specs.
Yeah, so kind of like to relate it to like another art form for anyone who does photography. It's kind of like trying to shoot in RAW versus shooting in JPEG.
Yes.
Yeah. Where RAW retains all of the color and tone information, where JPEG compresses the whole thing, which gives you a lot less to work with later. Yeah.
And another thing I always look for in cameras is like what the in-camera motion stabilization is, because Sony has really good motion stabilization. So if you're shooting like handheld, it helps a whole lot. And if you're shooting on a camera that doesn't have that and you're shooting handheld, it doesn't look all that great.
Yeah. And then that's where you, the editor, come in later and now you have to stabilize it, right?
And you're thinking, oh, who shot this? It's so shaky. Oh, wait, I shot that.
Yeah. Well, and just on that, getting into editing programs and things you've learned, what do you like to use?
So I started out on some program. I don't even know what it was. It was in like
Windows Movie Maker.
Probably.
Yeah.
So in college, I worked on Final Cut Pro 7, And then post college, it was a funny story. I was working on Final Cut Pro 7 just for, freelance projects, whatever. And then got an opportunity at like a design company in like downtown Cincinnati because their video editor was leaving. I had been working with them a little bit, and they're like, "Hey, we need a video editor. Can you jump in?" And I was like, "Sure. What do you guys edit on?" And they're like, "Oh, Premiere." And I was like, I've never worked in that. Can you give me a few days to learn it?" And so I got one of the books that you can learn it from because I figured, why learn it from the internet when you can buy a book?
Yeah. Hipster man.
Yeah, exactly. So I taught myself Premiere for a couple weeks, and then that's what I've been editing on ever since. Although I know a little bit of Final Cut 10, and I'm trying to relearn Avid because I learned that in college, and then I've lost all of that information. But basically, regardless of what platform you edit on, you're still editing something.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Kind of the basic concept, just still the same.
Yes.
Regardless, it's just how you go about doing camera changes.
It's like if you want to shoot on a Nikon, Canon, or Sony, you might personally find one better than the other, but you're still shooting a photo. Mm-hmm. And if I'm shooting a photo versus if my grandma is shooting a photo, it doesn't matter what the camera is. It's all about the person shooting the photo, and I love my grandma, but I feel like I'm probably take a photo better than she can.
Oh, you heard it here first, folks. I'm just kidding.
So, again, asking your opinion, were you as disappointed with Final Cut 10 as everybody else was?
I was at first, but I think with it being, from what I understand, built from the ground up, it's catching up a little bit with all of the metadata tagging and all that stuff that I don't know a whole lot about because I don't edit in it, but I would love to reacquaint myself with it.
Nice. Yeah, I was part of that movement when everyone was like, "We hate Final Cut now, we're all doing Premiere," so I was trained on Premiere.
Nice.
And you had brought up color grading, and I recognize that me and other people might not know what that is and what program you do that on.
So color grading is, there's technically, if you're going to get technical, a difference between color correcting and color grading, although it's basically the same thing. Color correcting is correcting the color, hence color correcting, and color grading is more or less giving it a specific film look. So sort of like an Instagram filter, but not something where you would walk out of a movie going, "Wow, that was really great color grading."
Yeah.
It's something that you want to let go unnoticed. So color grading is essentially taking the video content that you have and making it look more contrasty, or if you're trying to replicate that it was shot in the 60s or the 20s, you might make it a little less saturated or more saturated, or make it a little sepia tone or something like that. You want to give it a feel. A movie I have not seen, but that has immediately jumped to my mind, is Letters from Iwo Jima. And they shot that super, super contrasty with not a whole lot of color. And if you flip it on the TV, you're going to go, "Wow, this is almost a black and white movie." Mm-hmm. But if you're watching it with, from start to finish, it feels like it should be that way for that content, or because it was, a movie that's based on World War II. So you'd want to fit the color grading to the tone of the movie.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's awesome. And that's done on, and this is a program that I just learned about. Yes. So we were talking about this over dinner, but what's it called again? DaVinci?
It's DaVinci Resolve. Technically, if you're including their first and last name, it's Blackmagic DaVinci Resolve. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a color grading software, and they actually have gotten into video editing recently, and I would love to get on that bandwagon soon, but have not gotten on it yet. But it's the greatest color grading software that I have used. I feel like there are probably other ones out there that are really good, but it's my favorite color grading program.
Yeah. It's free. I just got it 2 days ago. I love it, and I'm super wet behind the ears on this, but oh man, I'm excited.
For someone who has only done a little bit of editing, me. What would be the roles of an editor?
So for what I do at work, depending on the day, is I'm editing like a video for a small business. So basically what we have is we have a videographer go out for 2 hours to a small business. So let's say it's, Jim's Burgers, and they interview Jim for about 30 minutes, and then they do about an hour of like B-roll, which, side note, the story of B-roll, you had 2 tapes, A-roll for the interview, B-roll for the shots that you would get that were not interview, hence B-roll. Anyways, back into what I was saying.
Main story, yes. That was good, I like that.
You have like 30 minutes of interview, an hour of B-roll, and then maybe like 30 minutes of photos. So that content comes to me. What I do is I sync up the video and the audio if there was some external audio, go through the interview, try to cut it down to usually about a minute and a half if it's like a different project, or if this is, a freelance project that I shot myself and it needs to be a 7-minute video, then I'll cut down the interview to like 7 minutes, and then I'll go through all the B-roll, pick out the best shots, go through again, pick out like the best of the best shots. I'll pick some music, I'll add the B-roll shots to the interview that way, because I think most people who are in the creative industry probably maybe know this, but people who are outside of the creative industry probably have no idea that, like, if you have a video of, someone being interviewed for a minute and a half, it's usually not one long take of them talking for a minute and a half.
Yeah.
It's probably like an interview that's, been an hour long or like 10 hours long, just cut down to a minute and a half or however long that, TV segment needs to be. And so basically it's a video editor's job to, not let that get out of like, oh, that sounded like 2 different sound bites the editor combined into one. It's like, it should be completely seamless. You should never ever notice the video editing. And that's basically.
So basically you take people and you make them sound smarter and you do it with magic.
Exactly.
Yeah, got it. Okay.
Or you could do the reverse and you could make them look dumb, and that's what we call bloopers.
Yeah. So now that we know like what you do as an editor, a couple things you've mentioned already were the projects that you've done. Like you've mentioned weddings, you mentioned the auto mechanic stuff. So what projects have you done and things that you've learned?
So I used to, and still do a lot of like church projects, whether that's like in churches I go to or friends' churches. So that was probably the first like 3 years of my work is like, hey, it's just me and another friend, and we're doing all these videos for church, so we can do whatever we want.
Yeah.
And that was sort of like my film school. It was like I went to college, I graduated, and then it was like me and a friend, and we were doing all our videos. So it was like that was the little film school.
So you did that post-college?
Yes.
So in college, were you working on any like projects like that, or was it just school?
It was. So it was mostly school during that time. It was occasionally some side projects of like, oh, this guy needs a slideshow for his daughter's graduation. So cool, I know how to do that stuff. I can do that. But some of the, or most of the projects were, of course, like church projects. I do like 3 to 4 weddings a year, which is usually pretty fun. And then just, I guess, some not necessarily random freelance projects, because that makes it sound bad, but it's like, oh, a friend of a friend, I'm working on a Kickstarter video, or I'm working on a real estate video, or kind of stuff like that.
Nice. Yeah, so like in college, and then you got out of college, did your church videos, did wedding stuff as well?
Yeah.
And then when was your first gig that you felt like wasn't like for a friend? You know what I mean?
Good question. I feel like I know I've had, gigs where it's like, oh, I'm this is the client I'm working with, I'm a professional, but it still feels like, oh, but this is still like a friend of a friend. So like I can, it doesn't feel like I've graduated from, being in college to like, oh, I'm now a professional.
Yeah.
I still sort of feel like, oh, yeah, but I'm not really a professional. I'm still a college student.
Yeah.
Sure. And do you feel like that's a feeling, like that idea of like, I'm a professional is kind of a unrealistic expectation, especially for people in college?
Yeah, it kind of is, because it's almost like maybe when you're a kid and you think, oh, I can't wait to be an adult. And then you're, 23 or 29 or 51 and you're like, wait, but I'm still not an adult.
Yeah.
And that's sort of the feeling like, oh, I can't wait till I graduate and I'll make it out in the real world. And then you do and you're like, wait, but I still feel like a college student. There's still so much I don't know.
Yeah.
Crazy.
And for that reason is why I kind of wanted to ask about you getting into wedding photography, because that's like a whole industry in and of itself. So, one, how'd you get into that? And then two, like what sorts of things are you doing on those shoots?
So I think my first wedding project was probably a friend or a friend of a friend, and it was like, hey, you have a camera, can you put it up on a tripod and like hit record for the ceremony? And I was like, oh, sure, that's super easy. And then it was like, hey, would you like to like follow us around and shoot some video? And I was like, oh, sure, why not? Pay me like $100.
Yeah.
Which I'm like, oh, hey, I was fresh out of college, that seems appropriate. But it's, slowly evolved into, usually like an 8 to 10 hour day of getting there with the bride or the groom and following them as they set up, and then recording, like the first look and the ceremony and the reception. And I feel like it's an industry and it's a job that you can do so much in. You can like get drones, you can get like steady cams and stabilizers and all of this stuff. And I would love to do that someday maybe, but I feel like it's too much work and too stressful for what I'm capable of. And I'm like, I'm just going to follow you around. I'm going to be your shadow. I don't want you to notice me. I'm not going to say like, hey, can you do this again? Or like, can you look this way? Or we've got 10 minutes. Let's go across to the lake real quick. It's like, no, just you do your thing. I'll be behind you. I'll edit it together. It'll be really, really good.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. That was my next question. So when you shoot a wedding, are you always the one editing it and vice versa? Like, are you always shooting every wedding that you edit as well?
Yes, usually. The last wedding I shot, I didn't edit because the person who was going to shoot it was like a friend of the bride, so they didn't want her to shoot it. So I was like, oh, I'll shoot it and then just give you my footage, which is actually really... I'm very fearful of that, because now I'm like, wait, they're going through my footage and there's so much there that's not really good. They're going to realize that I'm not actually as good as they thought I was, because they've only seen the finished product. Now they're going to see the 95% of the stuff that makes the cutting room floor.
Yeah.
But
I can't remember who said it, but there's a term in photography which is never show anyone your contact sheet.
Yes.
For that exact reason.
Yeah, you're going to see like all the times where I was recording like my shoes as I was walking and forgot to hit record. And I had one wedding couple who like asked to have the raw footage, and I was like, I can give that to you. I don't mind if like some people are like, no, and I'm like, okay, I'm sort of like that, but hey, it's your wedding, I can give it to you, but it is like 100 gigs of footage, and I only used about 5, so the 95 that are there is not very good.
Yeah.
And if you can mail me a hard drive, and then they're like, no, that's okay. And I was like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
I'm safe.
Yeah. Reputation secure. Yeah. Well, that's awesome, man.
Yeah, that's crazy.
You know what? I'm going to transition it. So you were talking about your kind of interview that you did with the mechanic.
Yes.
So first, how did you know this person? Family friend, I'm assuming. But you can go into that. And then also, what kind of a story were you able to tell?
The auto mechanic shop has been there. I think it's been in his family for like 2 or 3 generations. And it's been like on the corner in Laughlin, which is the village I grew up in, for like a long time.
It's a village, even.
Yes,
I'm just kidding.
we don't have enough people to be qualified as like a town or a city.
Really?
So we're technically a village, and
Oh, that's so cool.
side note, I worked for the village service department for 2 summers, and we would mow and water the flowers and do the trash, and there are so many stories. I wish I could go back and do a video on the Laughlin Service Department.
Yeah,
but
that sounds like an amazing movie title. Yeah,
that'll be the sequel to the Auto Mechanic.
Yeah.
But we knew him because our family would take our cars to him when they'd break down, and it's nice because he's not like a big mechanic where he's got working on 100 cars a day. It's like, he's probably working on 3 or 4, so you might get it fixed in an hour, you might get it fixed in a couple of days, but you're not going to get ripped off for whatever it costs. So the story there that intrigued me was it's right next to the highway that goes through Cincinnati, and they're expanding the highway, and they are taking down the street that's right next to the highway, which is his street. So they're taking down all the houses and any buildings that are in the way, and his is in the way. And he was trying to talk with the village of Laughlin of getting some sort of not a grant, but some sort of recognition, because it's a historical landmark, because it's been in his family for 2 or 3 generations. It's been there for 60, 70 years or whatever, and it didn't work out, and there was just a lot of tension and back and forth between him and the village of you need to be out of here by next year, which was in 2006, and it's been 12 years. And it's just he's a really interesting guy. He's shy but talkative, I guess, and so he's just one of those people where they start talking and you're like, this is very interesting, just listening to you talk and tell stories and stuff. And so I, contacted him through my dad, who knows him. I'm like, hey, just tell him I'll come back for Christmas, and does he mind if I come in with a camera for a couple hours? And he was like, sure, why not? And so it was a really fun process.
That's awesome, man.
So as far as the kinds of stories that you look for, are you looking for more documentary type of stories? Is that why you shoot wedding photography, why you shot this? Would you say that's more your niche?
Well, it definitely did not start out as the documentary style, because I remember someone was asking me now, do you want to get into films or movie making, or do you want to do documentaries? And I was like, oh, there's no way I'm doing documentaries. I'm doing films because I want to
Mission Impossible.
Yeah. I want to set up the lights and have the camera do the cool movement and do all of this, and I still love that. But having done that for a little bit in college, where it's okay, we're gonna have a shoot where I'm gonna set up these lights and I'm gonna set up the camera and we're gonna do this shot because it's on the storyboard. It's really, really fun, but it takes so much time, and unless you're willing to go really fast, if you want to shoot a 3-minute music video and you want to establish every shot and set up the lights, it's going to take you several days or weeks, especially if you're a one-man crew, which is what I am most of the time.
Most people probably, yeah.
And so usually it's I'm working on this project. I have the camera for a weekend, so I need to get everything done on Saturday because I need to ship the camera back on Sunday. And so when I'm doing that, it's it makes more sense to do more of the documentary work of shooting video for a wedding or shooting video of our mechanic or something like that, because it's not just more economic, but it's easier, and plus it makes the job for the video editor more fun because you can sort of find the story in the editing room. So when I was shooting the video for the mechanic, I was I don't know what this is going to be. I don't know if this is going to be happy, if it's going to be grungy, if it's going to be sad. I'll find it in the editing room, I guess. Yeah. And that was the best part of the process, was just trying to figure out, okay, based on the content I have, what's the story going to be?
That's awesome.
Crazy. Man. I feel a lot of people in college think, I'm going to do this, and I end up doing something else. So when you went into video, did you have something in mind? Like you said, it was filmmaking. So my question then is, did you write scripts? Did you do all of that stuff? And would you like to come back to that in the future?
So, post-college, I definitely didn't have, like, some sort of grand idea of what I wanted to do. It was just like, oh, you know, I want to shoot video, I want to edit video. I don't know what that looks like just yet. And then it started turning into, like, oh, I'd love to move out to LA and get into filmmaking and be a director someday. And, you know, because I can get a DSLR camera and I can edit on my laptop, like, I can do that if I wanted to.
Yeah.
And to a degree, I still can. But once I got out here, I was like, oh man, it's going to be so much work. Mm-hmm. And LA is so much different than Cincinnati. And I enjoy doing what I do.
Yeah.
But I would love to, maybe in some parallel universe, get back into like filmmaking and shooting and editing and directing and script writing. But in this current universe, maybe.
Yeah. Is there a project you always wanted to do?
Not necessarily. Like, I've always wanted to be like a director, but it's not like I've got all these ideas that are being wasted, or oh, I've got all these shots I want to do, or this story I want to tell. It's like, oh no, I'd love to, like, you know, like in the Matrix when they download the information onto the person. It's like, I would love to do that, of like, make me a director. All right. Okay, now I'm a director.
Yeah.
So more of just a pipe dream.
Yeah.
Got it. So do you feel like there were stories that you wanted to tell, or you wanted to just be like handed a story and then you take it through to completion?
It kind of goes back and forth, and it depends on what I'm currently working on, whether it's like with freelance stuff or with work stuff, because sometimes I'll be like, dude, I want to make this video, just give me like something, I'll go write the script, I'll make a Pinterest board, I'll shoot it, I'll edit it, and sometimes I'm just like, you know what, I'm feeling a little creatively dry, just like tell me what you want, and I'll edit it, and that's what I'll do. So it depends on like the creative season that I'm in.
Yeah, so it goes up and down.
Yeah.
I think that's fair to say. I think a lot of artists go through that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. And I think one thing that's interesting that you're talking about, like with the mechanics story, is how you really were the director there, even though it was in the editing room. And I know sometimes for some directors, that's just their style. It's just finding that story that way, or really directing the story that way. And I think that's really cool. So one thing I wanted to ask about, I know this kind of goes back to what we were talking about a little earlier, is trends of editing that you see right now. What are they, and are they influenced from the internet and the kind, you know what I mean, with so much content being out there?
I would have been so much better answering this probably like a year or two ago, when I still am into Vimeo, but I was like really into Vimeo, so I like always check out like the Vimeo staff pick and be watching like 5 videos a day. And now I'm like, oh, I haven't checked Vimeo this week. I'll do that next week. But I think a video editing style that I definitely saw a lot of a couple years ago was, I don't even know the technical term for it, but I would say like hyperlapse. I know that is a technical term, but I'm trying to think if it's the exact editing technique that I've seen, where it's basically like a time lapse, but it's moving, and then like you quickly zoom into the next shot, and it sort of like takes you through, and it's like lots of fast cuts, fast editing, lots of sound effects. And it's one of those things that like you see a few videos the first time, you're like, wow, this is like amazing. Yeah. And then you see like a few more and you're like, oh, this is cool. And then you see a few more and you're like, oh, they're just doing what that one guy did.
Yeah.
So that's one of the editing techniques that I've seen come and not go yet. It's still here, but come and go.
Yeah. And I mean, maybe this was a couple years ago because I've just now started stepping into this world, but I feel like everyone's pushing for like desaturated blues right now. You know what I mean? In all of their video editing. Yeah. What do you feel about that style?
It depends. It's one of those things that I could sit here and say like, oh, I don't really like it or I do really like it. But if it like fits, I'm not going to complain about it. Something I've also noticed is with not just like Sony cameras, but any, newer good cinema camera where you can shoot really, really flat, it tends to be that maybe on purpose, maybe on accident, the video ends up being very, very flat, so there's not a whole lot of contrast, which I generally do like, but sometimes it feels a little bit vanilla or same of like, oh, this you probably shot on this type of camera, you threw a quick color grade on it and then sent it out the door, as opposed to like, hey, we're gonna like really work on the color of this video and try to make it a little unique instead of like, oh, making it look like that one video I saw.
Yeah. But ultimately it comes down to whether it fits the mood of the content or not. So like a movie like Bird Box, that works perfectly for, but a movie such as Little Miss Sunshine, that would have been horrible.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I haven't seen Bird Box yet, but I have seen Little Miss Sunshine. And whatever color grading or cinematography they were using in Bird Box would not have fit for Little Miss Sunshine.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome, man. And that kind of makes me, because, and Christian had already kind of brought this up, so I want to just continue with it with projects into the future and things you want to do. So what's something that you want to do specifically on the editing side, since we talked about possibly directing, if that alternate universe comes into reality, but something that you want to do with editing in the future?
I think I would absolutely love to edit like an actual film. I think there would be many, many, many steps between now and that, but I think that would be so cool. Something I do love doing is just like telling stories is such a vague statement, but just like telling people stories, whether it's like stories of like a college student or telling stories like of a church testimony, just finding something interesting in someone's life, regardless of if it's like my neighbor or somebody famous, like just being in someone's life and getting to tell sort of what they do. It's not like necessarily a specific project that I'm looking forward to do, but just like stories and videos like that where it's like, hey, I'm gonna tell the story of Ben Davis and make his life look really, really cool. Like I want to do that, and I want to like live in that and see what you do and take that to the big screen, but like big screen on like computer screen.
Yeah.
Or like
my life doesn't deserve. No, just kidding.
I'm sure I could find something interesting in there.
Yeah. So between the sideburns. Yeah.
That'd be the name of it.
Yeah.
I'd also love to like edit a music video someday. I've like shot and edited like a friend's music video where it's like, hey, I'm gonna play and you just film me and then edit it and we'll put in some sort of B-roll footage. But an actual music video, something like that would be really fun too. But I'm sure there are many, many steps between now and that.
What do you think it is about music videos that has guided them to kind of be that artsy and kind of take its own way? Do you think it's just MTV and when that started, or why isn't it the same as the trends that we see in regular film?
Yeah. I'm sure it probably had to do something with MTV, and like I know there was like a not a trend, but like when Spike Jonze and Michelle Gondry and some of those guys were like doing music videos, it was like it did turn into like its own creative art form. I feel like over the past few years since you've had like DSLRs, it's like someone who's really creative who doesn't have the money to go out and buy a $20,000 camera can like buy a DSLR for $1,000 or a couple $1,000 and like go shoot something and have it be really creative. And because he's not working for a studio or a label, they can do whatever they want to do and, kind of use their creativity, and people see that work, and then they get to do bigger projects until, they're doing a music video or something. I saw Beck's music video recently, and I loved that because it was like, and I don't listen to Beck's music, but the music video was like very, very creative, very cool, regardless of if it's for like Beck or if it's for like some guy on Vimeo I've never heard of. Creativity like that, you can like take chances on, whereas if you're looking at like the latest Hollywood blockbuster, they can't necessarily take chances on movies when there's a $200 million budget attached to it. But if it's like, hey, it's, my friend who's a musician, I'm gonna, just do a cool music video and take some chances. That's when you see that creativity come to life.
Is that what's drawing you to that as an expressive art form?
Probably, because you can be so creative with that. But if you're, making a infomercial, it's like, I can't really be very creative with this infomercial. It's like content and then put the 1-800 number at the end. But if it's like, hey, it's music video, it's like you want to feel something. You're not necessarily like telling or saying information.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. And I think that's cool, just to take it back to how we started watching your reel and seeing the amazing work that you're doing. That's super creative, super fun to see, and fun to talk about. So thanks for coming on.
Yeah.
And so what I want people who are listening now to be able to do is to be able to check out your work. So where can they go?
So they can go to my website, which is benslabach.com. Slabach is not the easiest to spell, so it's Slabach.
Nice.
Sweet. And do you post on Instagram?
I do.
Like that?
I believe my Instagram handle is Ben_Slabach. I don't post as much as I used to, but I am still active.
Nice.
That's awesome, man.
Please do go check out his work. Give this guy a shout out wherever you go. He's got amazing work. He's a great guy, and we really hope to see you succeed in the future.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Thanks for telling us about your work, about your plans for the future. And I know you're busy and you're engaged, so congrats.
Thank you.
Up top.
Yeah, that's right.
Engaged brothers.
Yeah.
Well, it was nice to have another Ben on the podcast, so thanks for coming on, man.
Thanks, Ben.
Azusa Man.
Or you can just call me BS.